This is the perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah! Another myth bites the dust.
Hello, TBR Nation. This is Amber King from the Perfect REA. Thank you for joining me on today's Spotlight Friday, where I'll be covering the highlights and action items from this week's episodes. Matt and Micah kicked off Monday's episode by talking about this theme that came up during two recent masterminds. And it ended up coming from an article that stated that there's a theoretical limit as to how many clients an advisor can serve. The number that was shared was between 25 and 50 clients per financial advisor. They've also heard from advisors who claim that they can only work with a certain number of clients because they provide more service than every other advisor. But they said that comment is narcissistic and inaccurate. The guy shared an example of an advisor who's a similar team size as Micah and stated that the team is overworked, so they need to bring on more team members. But they said that's the last thing they should do. Instead, they went through a time exercise to see how long it actually took to serve one client, because you need to take an honest look at how much time things really take. Matt and Micah said that people use this to justify their own lack of success, and that if you think you've plateaued, then that's a mindset. If you're not pushing yourself, then you're not going to improve. They said you need to think about where people put up walls and set limits and where those numbers even came from. You need to question those numbers, and you have to be intentional. So if you're only planning on bringing on a certain number of clients this year, that's okay, as long as you're still achieving your goals. But the issue is when people say that they're at capacity with their 25 clients. The guy said that hiring someone else feels like the easy button, that all your problems will go away. But it doesn't make your problems go away. You just end up with different types of issues. It's not a magic button. Matt did this exercise with his team by looking back at the numbers from when it was just him and Colleen in his office. And when they did this, they realized that they weren't at the same level of efficiency. So once they get back to that same level, then they can bring somebody else on. Micah talked about how it's hard to get out of that shopkeeper mentality, that there's a subconscious thought that if people aren't busy all day, then they're going to be fired. So even if their job doesn't take a full 8 hours, they're going to turn it into 8 hours just to keep their job. That's not an easy thing to fix. The team is always going to be busy, but you need to look to see whether you're having them work on the right things and how much busy work you're creating for them. They said this can happen for advisors who are providing customized advice for clients instead of finding one or two models that work and then making adjustments. They said people get stuck in a mindset of doing things a certain way. So instead, you should be looking at your blind spots. Matt and Micah said, before you tell yourself something can't be done, you should step back and ask yourself why you think that way. Consider who is successfully doing something and then figure out how they're doing it. So getting to those numbers, how many clients can an advisor have? Matt and Micah went through the basics of this. The number of meetings you want to have, the average revenue of a client, and the number of clients you have. They said you need to figure out what you're solving for. Is it revenue, time, or clients? They walked through how to figure out what these numbers look like depending on what you're solving for by using simple math, and that it's about being intentional with the numbers. And they said to remember that it's important you spend your time with advisors who have the practice that you want, instead of those who are making excuses for the practice that they don't have. Let's get into action items. Take your revenue from the prior quarter and divide it by the total number of clients that you have. That includes your exceptions. Do the time exercise, whether you're solving for revenue, number of households, or for time. And start to try to identify what your blind spots are. Anywhere where you're making those excuses, write it down and start to quantify it. On Wednesday, Matt was joined by Ross Welte from 5 Stone Financial Group, where he talked about creating balance within your firm and core values. Ross talked about how there's this big tendency to want everything to be perfect before you act on it. He and his partner Drew began using the mantra of perfection is the enemy of progress, but you can still strive for excellence. And that every time you do something, it only gets better, but you have to start somewhere. Ross talked about the balance between him and his partner, where he's a visionary and his partner is more on the analytical side and the integrator and implementer, and that while their personalities differ, they manage and balance their strengths and aren't afraid to be open and honest with each other, even though they're opposites. Ross then talked about his core values and that they're the base of everything in his firm and what they do. He said they aren't just empty words on a piece of paper, but instead they're the filter through which he makes almost every business decision. He shared each of those core values and the meanings behind them, which are integrity, that they practice what they preach. Learning that they're committed to improvement and continually educating themselves and their clients. Generosity, giving their time, effort, and energy. Relationships, striving to build lasting relationships. Legacy, making the world a better place. And gratitude, which they choose to do on a daily basis. They want to make sure that they're working with the right people, so they want their clients to have the same values as well. They aren't just living their core values, but they're using them as their measuring stick for everything they do in their business. Matt asked how Ross handles this if he's dealing with imposter syndrome, because he's drawing a line in the sand with these values. Ross said that the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. And realizing how much he doesn't know, he said, is huge. So he recommends, instead of looking at what you don't know, look at how far you've come. Matt said that everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone has those days where you doubt yourself, but it's how you push yourself to the other side that makes a difference. Ross also talked about implementing value adds and the tools that he's learned as a Backstage Pass member. He said search was the first thing that he implemented. He said because he did that, and because of all the time he gained, it allowed them to add in those value adds. It didn't require extra time, but it did require effort. Ross said that by doing this, that it's bringing more predictability for his clients, and that they end up loving it, and he feels that he's delivering more value to them. Let's get into action items. Just do it. It's easy to overthink and try to make something perfect. Find something that resonates with you and just decide to implement it. Don't worry about being perfect and accept what results you get and make adjustments from there. And then read the book, Your Next 5 Moves. On Thursday's episode, Jamie talked about leadership, but she took a twist from focusing on the positive aspects of situations and instead went through her worst type of leader. She said this is the leader who has to be liked, and that person is the greatest threat in an organization. Because that person isn't focused on encouraging their team to be their greatest and best selves, and they can't have some of those tough conversations that need to be had. Instead, this is a person who makes a priority for everyone to have fun and makes sure employees are happy. That then creates an environment where team members lack accountability. For example, they won't care about deadlines because there's no recourse if they miss them. This can also lead to you delegating and then taking things back, which is insulting to your employees. You're not helping them if you do that because then they don't have that opportunity to level up. Jamie said a liked leader would run into the risk of saying that they'll jump in and take care of something. But then that shows that you don't trust your team. So if you do that, then they'll never be held accountable to you or care about a deadline. Another fault for this type of leader is that you create a culture of indecisive, inconsistent decision-making. And you end up trying to run your organization by committee. But it's your organization and you're the leader. You want to put people in positions to problem solve, but at the end of the day, it's you on the line and you have to make that decision. Another mistake with this type of leader is that it leads to a lack of direction and clarity with your team. Jamie also said that you can't be afraid of conflict. That conflict is healthy if it's done respectfully. Innovation and strategy and synergy happens there. Another flaw, which she said is the most critical one, is that this type of leadership erodes respect. She said when you're the leader who has to be liked, you end up circumventing processes and strip people of their power behind their back just for the sake of making other people happy. The people you put in charge no longer have authority, and then they're no longer respected if you go around policies and processes. That can destroy your company culture. She said a liked leader will make too many exceptions. You can't just pick and choose who gets to follow policy. Jamie said a leader who has to be liked will corrupt and ultimately destroy the best of organizations. So don't be that type of leader. Let's get into action items. Are you holding your team members accountable? Look to see the last time that they missed a deadline and create a policy around deadlines that they can't be missed. Look at the areas that cause conflict in your organization and see about creating an activity around that conflict, or bring in a coach to help work through certain conflicts. Look at your policies and employee handbook and go through everything to make sure that you have standard operating procedures in place. Have your employees sign off on everything, and then make sure that you're following everything in that handbook. That wraps up this week's recap. Thank you for joining me on today's Follow-Up Friday. Be sure to give us 5 stars wherever you're enjoying this podcast and share this or any of our episodes with another advisor or a team member who you think might benefit from listening. And until next time, happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect